What's doing, everybody? I'm Alec Lace. Thank you for watching First Class Fatherhood. I have got a tremendous guest for what is the 400th episode of First Class Fatherhood. Retired Navy SEAL Commander Jocko Willink joins me on the podcast today. Jocko is very well known for his podcast, the Jocko Podcast, as well as his best-selling books, The Dichotomy of Leadership, Extreme Ownership, as well as The Way of the Warrior Kid. Today, you get to hear about Jocko Willink, the father. It is such a tremendous honor to have him on the podcast, especially for my 400th episode. So go down there and smack the subscribe button, tap the like, and let's jump into it right now with retired Navy SEAL Jocko Willink on First Class Fatherhood. Joining me now, First Class Father Jocko Willink. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Alec.
All right, let's start it right here. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I've got 4 kids, 21, 19, 17, and 11.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, I got 4 kids myself, 3 boys and a girl. What's the denomination for you over there?
I've got the opposite, 3 girls and 1 boy.
Wow, very cool. What kind of sports or activities are they all into?
You know, we live out here in California. They're into kind of a little bit of everything. Obviously, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, surfing, gymnastics. My oldest daughter did ballet pretty heavily. So pretty much those kind of things.
Yeah, very cool. And if you could, Jocko, for the 1 or 2 people who don't know, if you could just take a minute to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Oh, I was in the military for 20 years, and when I retired from the military, I started working with companies, teaching leadership, and that's pretty much what I've been doing. I have a podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you for your service, Jocko. This is a big honor for me here. So I just, along this journey that you had, about how old were you then, Jocko, when you first became a father, and how did becoming a dad kind of change your perspective on life?
You know, when I, had my first kid, let's see, I guess I was 27 or so. And, I was already in the SEAL teams. I'd been in the SEAL teams for a while. So for me, it was, when you're in the SEAL teams, you've got a bunch of people that are more important than you. Your platoon mates, the guys in your platoon, they're more important than you are. And so I was used to that feeling. And then when you have children, you realize that now you've got some more people in your life that are more important than you are, and you got to put them first.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I really respect so much our military men and women, because just as a father myself, I hate when I have to work an overtime shift and I miss out on some things with my kids, and it's like for such a small amount of time. But to be deployed, be overseas, and miss out on so much time, I can't even begin to imagine it. So what would you consider then, Jocko, to be the top values that you hope to instill in your kids as they grow up?
Really the values that I wrote about, I've written a bunch of kids books as well, and one of the series of kids books that I've written is called Way of the Warrior Kid, and the values that I try to get into my kids are all in those books. Being disciplined with the way that they live so that they're healthy and they're strong and they're smart, being a hard worker with a good solid work ethic, being a protector and a defender instead of being a bully, being respectful to other people, helping other people out, putting other people ahead of themselves, staying calm, not being super emotional, and being a leader. And then on top of all those things, always staying humble.
Yeah, very well said, Jocko. And for my wife and I, going from 2 to 3 was the most challenging of the change for us. So usually when I have guys that have about the same kids as I do, what would you say was the most difficult transition for you as far as number of kids?
I was deployed a lot of the time, and so it was all on my wife, and she was just a superhero back here. I wouldn't be able to tell you which one was the hardest. I know that for me, the biggest shock to the system was baby number 1. After we had baby number 2, 17 months later, and then baby number 3, 18 months after that, it was just mayhem for my wife, and she handled it like a trooper.
Yeah, wow, incredible. And my wife is one that stayed home for the most part. She just went back to work last year, so she always stayed at home with the kids, and it was one of those things where I got a real good taste of it when I was by myself with the 3, the 4, and I got a really good a lot more respect once I had to go through that. And obviously, big thing with you, Jocko, is discipline. It's something you preach about, something you talk about. What type of disciplinarian are you as a dad, and is that different than the discipline style that you grew up with?
My parents both worked when I was growing up, so there was a lot of leeway with what I could get away with doing and the way that I behaved, and I didn't really abuse it. I was a rebellious kid, but I wasn't doing anything that was too crazy. So I would say with my parents, they gave me a lot of leeway. I do the same thing with my kids. As my kids get a little bit older, they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want as long as it is good for their long-term benefit. And if they're doing something that, maybe is starting to get out of line, then, I'll talk to them about it. And the way, if you were to ask me what kind of discipline I use with my kids, I would say my primary disciplinary tool with my kids is that I ask them questions. I'll sit down and ask them questions. I'll sit down and say, why are you doing that? What are you expecting to happen? What are you looking for an outcome there? How is this going to benefit you in the long run? So I think, just for me, that's normally enough for my kids to realize that maybe they're not making a good decision, and they'll straighten back out.
Yeah, good stuff. And you have it the reverse of me here. One of the biggest concerns I have, my daughter's my only girl. She's, 6 years old now, so I got a long way to go, thank God here. But you've already been there with this. How did you kind of handle it when your kids became old enough to hit that dating scene?
I didn't really think too much about it. I mean, they're human beings, and they're going to be at some point start to hang around with the members of the opposite sex. And I just kind of told them, keep control over your emotions. I think I've told a couple of them, that I don't even remember who I went out with in high school. So even though it seems like it's a big deal, it's not. Take your time, no big deal. I didn't really get too hyped about it. And my kids have all had nice relationships with members of the opposite sex.
And obviously now you've had a lot of success with the Echelon Front, with the books, with the podcast. You've been crushing it just about everything that you touch here. What was the genesis of the Echelon Front, and where do you plan on taking it in the future here?
Well, before I retired from the Navy, I had a friend that was the CEO of a big company, and he asked me to go and talk to his executive team about leadership. And so I went, just did it as a friend, as a favor. And when I got done talking, he said, I want you to talk to every division I've got in my company. And I told him, hey, I'm retiring. I'm not doing this kind of stuff. And he told me he'd pay me. And so started talking to all of his divisions in his company. And at one of those divisional meetings, the CEO of the parent company that owned his company was there. And when I got done, he came up and said, hey, I want you to talk to all the CEOs that I have at all my companies. So he paid me as well. And I went and did that. And from there, a bunch of those CEOs just came up and said, I want you to talk to my company. I want you to talk to my company. I want you to talk to my company. And then I had new business.
Yeah, and you talk to all these guys that are, big business heads and all that stuff. But can these principles of leadership that you preach, can they be applied to fatherhood as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all those, the four laws of combat, if you just take those as an example, you got cover and move, which is working together as a team. That's what a husband and wife have to do to survive and make things happen inside of a house. Got to keep things simple, right? We all know that. Prioritize and execute. Look, you got wrestling, you got dinner, you got jujitsu, you got to get the car fixed, you got homework. You multiply all those things times 4 different kids, and you better learn how to prioritize and execute. And then, of course, last law of combat is decentralized command. And that's something you need to do with the troops that you lead, the employees that you have, and your kids as well. Because if you do everything for your kids, then they're not going to figure out how to do it for themselves. If you do everything for your employees or you do everything for your troops, they're not going to learn how to do it themselves. So you got to let your kids lead. Just like you let your employees lead, just like you let your troopers lead, you got to let your kids lead. Let them figure out what they're going to make for lunch or dinner. Let them do their own laundry. Let them make sure that their homework is prepared for school. So that's decentralized command. And yep, these things apply in the business world. They apply on the battlefield. They apply in life, and they certainly apply within the family as well.
Yeah, very well said, Jocko. Yeah, that's one thing I talk about too. Like, we kind of simulate for our kids the things. Like, when I was a kid, we played a lot of street ball, but there was no refs, no coaches, no parents that were hovering around us telling us what to do. And we made all the teams up, we made the rules, we settled all the arguments. And I think our kids are kind of losing those problem-solving skills today because we get them all in organized sports at like the age of 4 with everything today.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
I'm curious to get your opinion. I know the SEALs have really just blown up here in the last decade or so with all the attention in the books and the movies and the shows and stuff like that. Me, as a civilian, I think it's awesome because I love to learn from your mindset. I'm more, attracted to that than I am so much the guts and the glory stuff of the war. I think the philosophy that you guys have is incredible. I think it's a benefit to our society that it's available to us. How do you kind of feel about the SEALs exposure, the SEAL team shows, the movies, and all that stuff?
You know, there's been a lot of great information that's come out about the heroic SEALs that have done incredible things out on the battlefield. I think it's important that those stories get out. When I had a book coming out that I had written, one of the SEAL admirals that was talking to me, and he read through the book and he really liked it. And he said, we are supposed to be quiet professionals, but that doesn't mean silent professionals. Doesn't mean we never say anything. And the stories and the principles that I was putting out, he was happy to see him going out there. He was happy to see a representation of the SEAL teams in a positive light. There's, you talk about how popular the SEALs are. Well, the SEALs get a lot of negative press as well. So, it's one of those things where it's a tough balance, and the bottom line is, we're supposed to be humble, and yet when you write a bunch of books about the SEAL teams that are about yourself, it's hard to claim that you're being humble. So you try and do it in the best possible way to share stories of those that made the ultimate sacrifice and try and share principles that will help people, and that's what I've been trying to do from my perspective.
Yeah, well said. And something that just came up here recently, one of the things I talk about a lot on the show, Jocko, is that there's like an attack on the family life, an attack on fatherhood, and certainly an attack on masculinity that's going on. And we just seen, they put a thing out about changing the SEAL ethos from making it gender neutral. Did you have any kind of opinion? Did you see that story, or what kind of opinion you have on that?
Yeah, I saw that they were doing something like that. I read through the directive from the admiral that he put out. I don't really understand what the point of that is. There's a lot of there's that whole thing, the SEAL ethos that was written a while ago, trying to give SEALs a baseline of how to make their decisions. So I think that's a positive thing to do, is to give SEALs some kind of an ethos where they can make decisions based on that ethos. The changes that they're making right now seems like they might be. I'm not really quite sure why they're doing it. I retired 10 years ago. I'm not 100% sure why they're doing it. There's not any female SEALs. I don't know if there ever will be, but yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on with that.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it kind of a little mind-boggling to myself as well. So, listen, Jocko, obviously you've had so much success in everything you do. What kind of plans or goals do you have for yourself here for the future? Any more books coming on the way? What's coming up next for you?
Yeah, I've got a few more books. I've got another Way the Warrior Kid book coming out in December. After that, I've got a novel coming out in probably September of 2021. And then another leadership book coming out after that. I'm going to keep making podcasts. We've got a company up in Maine where we're making all American made clothing. We've got entire supplement line out. I've got kids, Warrior Kid Mulk. So I got protein shakes for kids because parents are feeding their kids, drinks that are filled with the most horrible ingredients. So we make stuff that's actually good for kids, and it actually tastes good as well. We make those things for adults too. So we're going to keep growing that and expanding that. We've got an energy drink, and I hate to call it that because the energy drinks, when you look at what's in a normal energy drink, they're not good for you, and they really don't give you some false energy. The drinks that I'm making are good for you. They've got real energy. They're not overloaded with caffeine. There's no sugar. They taste great. So we'll continue to push forward with that. And then Echelon Front, trying to become the premier leadership consultancy in the world.
Yeah, awesome, Jocko. And the last thing I'm going to hit you with here, I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
I would say, kids, you got to remember that your kids are not going to be who you want them to be. They're going to be who they are, and you do have some influence over that, but don't try and impose too much upon them, just like you wouldn't do with an employee or with one of your troops. Don't try and impose too much upon them, or they're going to rebel against you, and they're not going to see the way things you see them. And, let them occasionally brush up against the guardrails of failure. It's okay. Let them get dinged up a little bit. Look, you don't want to let them drive off the cliff, but it's okay to take some dings along the way. And there's two things I've been talking about a lot when it comes to leadership lately. Two, I think, the most underrated tools in leadership. And number one is ask questions. And number two, listen to what people have to say. Listen to your kids. Listen to what they're telling you. You don't always have to be the one that's talking. And last but not least, of course, and this is what you hear all the time, enjoy it because it goes by quick.
Yeah, very well said. I love the message. This has been a big honor for me. I got to say, Jocko Willink, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Yeah, man, thanks for putting this word out there. Appreciate it. Good talking to you.